morning, boys and girls. Welcome to KidsPoint at CenterPoint Community Church. I'm Miss Peggy, and today is Sunday, May the 10th, 2020, and I hope by now you know it's a very special day. The second Sunday in May is Mother's Day, so if you didn't know by now, I'm really glad you're watching because it's an important day to honor your mother. Exactly. And of all things, we're going to have a story about a really amazing mother in the Bible. So I hope you're settled down. I hope you're ready. We're going to be going through a story that you might be familiar with. Maybe not. I hope so. And by the time we're done with it, I hope you get to know a little bit about this most amazing mother in the Bible. Now, I'll let you know a little bit about the background of what was going on in the Bible during the time that this mother was on earth. The Bible is a true and accurate record of things that have happened in the past, and we're going to be going way, 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 way back, even before Jesus was born. This account happened back in the Old Testament. And the mother's name, you probably know her. In fact, you probably know this name a lot. You might even have friends with this name. This is her name. Jochebed. Do you know anybody named Jochebed? Oh, well, now that you mention it, I don't think I do either. Well, she is an amazing woman, and I can't wait to tell you all about her. Now, Jochebed had a wonderful husband. Maybe you know someone with his name. His name. A-M-R-A-M. Amram. And do you have any friends or neighbors or cousins named Amram? Well, maybe you don't know who these people are. Let's keep going. Maybe you'll figure it out as we keep going. Jochebed and Amram lived back in the time when the Israelites, God's people, were slaves. Ooh, slaves. Slavery has happened throughout history. It's always wrong. Always 100% wrong. But at this particular time in history, God's people were slaves in the country of Egypt. So they weren't even in their home country of Israel. They were in the country of Egypt. And I don't know what you know about Egypt, but if you think real hard, you might remember that it is a very desert and dry country. It's beautiful, but it's very deserty. What do you think of when you think of the desert? Hot? Me too. And I think of sand. So I brought a little piece of sand, well, a little sample of sand with me today. You like this handy dandy plastic container I have here? Thanks to my grandkids for letting me have it. Oh, did you hear that? It's really noisy. Whoa, that was probably really loud when you listened to it. I brought sand. This is just sand from a sandbox. And you've probably been in places where the sand is very hot. You might have been to the beach and the sand is hot on your feet, hot when you build with it. Well, there was a lot of sand in the country of Egypt where the Israelite people, God's people, were slaves. So we know that it was hot. We know that there was a lot of sand. And the Israelites, as slaves, were forced to do a lot of work. In fact, the Israelites had to do a lot of building. So I brought a hammer. You might have used, this is actually more of a mallet. They would build things. They might have even helped build the pyramids. We don't know for sure. But we know that they were building. They had to work in the fields. I brought a rope because you know what? It reminds me that they weren't free. They couldn't go if they wanted to. And their slave masters drove them, the Bible uses the word ruthlessly, a really strong word that tells us that they were treated very badly. In fact, they were made to work in the hot sun. They were forced to do the crops. They were forced to build the buildings, the pyramids, the palaces. They were forced to work, and they were not given their freedom. So they were slaves. And they had been slaves in the country of Egypt for 400 years. That means that everybody who was friends with Amram and Jochebed, all the people in their time, none of them had ever been free. And none of them had ever known anybody among them who had been free. So they had been slaves, their people, the Israelite people, had been slaves in the country of Egypt for 400 years. When you think about it, 400 years is like back before the United States was a country. That's 400 years ago. It's hard to imagine it that long. So Amram and Jochebed were indeed slaves. We don't know what Amram's job was. It might have been different things. When you're a slave, you do what you're told. So he probably worked in the fields, or maybe he worked building bricks out of sand, or helping build some of the palaces or the pyramids. We don't know. And his wife, Jochebed, she probably had to work too, and they had a family. In fact, when we first meet Amram and Jochebed, they have 2 children. They have a little boy. He's 3. Imagine a 3-year-old. If you have a 3-year-old in your family, you might know what it was like. So probably lots of fun, busy, into everything. You know how 3-year-olds are. And then there's an older sister. We don't know her age, but based on what we've learned about her as we've studied in the Bible, I'm going to guess she was maybe 7. So let's kind of think someone who's 7. Raise your hand if you're 7. I know some of you just turned 8, but you remember what it's like to be 7. So we're going to say that the older sister was probably about 7. And as we get farther in the story, you'll see why I'm guessing she was somewhere around 7. So Amram and Jochebed and their 2 children, the little girl who was around 7, and we know the little boy was about 3, they were slaves in Egypt. Now things started to change, and not for the better. The king of Egypt, they called him the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt started to pay attention a little bit more to the slaves, all these Israelite people who were doing his work. The work he didn't want to do and the people of Egypt didn't want to do, they let the slaves do it. And he starts to notice something, and he's looking out at the slaves, and he's realizing, my word, that's a lot of slaves, which was good for the work, but the king began to realize, this could be a problem. What if there become so many slaves that there are so many slaves that they think that they can rebel against us and leave, take over, and then we'll be stuck with no one to do our work. This was a big problem. He was not a very nice king. He wasn't. But the Israelite people kept doing their work, and they kept praying. Because the people of Israel, the slaves, Amram, Jochebed, their friends, their family, they prayed, and they prayed to God to please send someone to help them be free. Help them quit being slaves. Let them go back to their home country of Israel and get free from the horrible burden of being made to work and slave without any pay, and they couldn't have their freedom. So they were praying because Amram, Jochebed, they all trusted God with all their heart, and they prayed and they prayed and they prayed. And I'm sure as Amram and Jochebed taught their children, they taught them to pray, God, please send someone, please, to deliver us from slavery. Remember I told you things started to get a little bit worse? Well, this is what happened. The king noticed that there were a lot of slaves. Like 2 million, that's a lot. Like a pile, a bunch. So many I can't even count, 2 million. And they just kept having more and more kids, and the population of slaves got bigger and bigger. So the king, this very wicked king, came up with an idea. Horrible idea. And when I tell you, it's probably just going to want to make you cry. It makes me feel horrible. He decided, I know how to keep these slaves in control and not trying to run away or overthrow my government. When they have a baby boy, when a baby boy is born, I'll just tell my Egyptian people to take that baby boy and kill him. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? You've probably had babies born into your family, maybe cousins or brothers or sisters or neighbors that you've seen or someone that you go to church with and you've seen new babies. Can you imagine how cruel and horrible that was? Well, that's what this king said. Do you think that the Israelite people listened and obeyed? Of course not. Who would? What a terrible thing to do. So the king found out that they weren't obeying. So he came it up and he made the order even worse. Right through the middle of this desert country. Remember we talked about how Egypt was a desert country with a lot of sand. But right down the center of the country was an enormous river. A wonderful river. A river called the Nile. N-I-L-E. And the Nile River went right down the middle of the country and emptied into the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, and it connected it through there. And it was a beautiful river. And along that river, the people could grow their food, and that's probably where a lot of the slaves worked, in the fields by the river where there was water. It provided transportation. So if you were in this part of the country and you needed to get a pile of bricks maybe to this part of the country, you could pile those bricks on a boat and go down the river, and that would save a lot of time. So the river provided life. It gave them water, it gave them transportation, it met their needs for bathing and getting drinks, and a lot of kids, I'm sure, and adults too, went to play at the edge of the river, just like we go to the beach here. They would go to the river. So the river provided them with all kinds of things they needed to live. But that king had the horriblest, worstest, it's not a real word, is it? But it kind of shows you how upset I am. He had the idea to take every newborn baby boy, not girl, boy, every newborn baby boy from the Israelites, the slave people, and he said, you need to take that baby boy and throw him in the river and kill him. I can't even imagine. Can you imagine how horrified the moms and dads were all throughout the slaves as they heard the king's order, and as it started happening, and their families were torn apart as they would have a baby boy and they would be taken from them. Now that's our setting. So we have Amram and we have Jochebed, and I told you they have two children, right? A little girl, and they have a boy, a littler boy, toddler. One day, they find out they're going to have a new baby. Oh, I'm sure they were excited, but don't you think they felt something else? What do you think they felt? Show me. Let me see your face. Turn to each other and show what kind of face you would have when you find out you're going to have a baby. First, you're excited. But with the orders that they had heard and the way the king was treating newborn baby boys, show me your face now. Maybe you're crying or scrunching up your face or doing this. Yes, I'm sure they were afraid. What do you suppose they prayed? I know what I'd be praying. Oh, Lord, please let me have a girl, right? Because girls would be fine. They would let the little girls live. Don't you suppose they prayed, oh, Lord, dear God, please let us have a little girl. Well, time passed, as it does. And eventually the time came for Amram and Jochebed to have their baby. And sure enough, they had a baby. And it was a boy. Oh, no, it was a boy. And so they were so happy because he was just a perfect little boy. They counted his 10 little toes and his 10 little fingers. And he was a beautiful baby boy. But what was the problem? You're right. The king had said all newborn baby boys were going to be thrown in the river to drown. And this is where Jochebed, her amazing faith, came through. Jochebed took that baby and she hid him. She hid him so people wouldn't know she'd had a baby. Have you ever been around a baby? Are they easy to hide? No. What do babies do a lot? Let me hear you. Wah, wah, wah. Babies cry. They do. And they cry in the middle of the night. They cry in the middle of the day. The more you want them to be quiet, what do? Wah, wah. The more they cry. Or so it seems sometimes. So for 3 months, Jochebed was able to keep her baby and nobody around knew that she'd had her baby. She probably stayed home a lot. What else are you going to do, right? She probably sent Amram out to maybe let the older children play, or maybe to bring him food from the garden or whatever, but she kept that baby hidden for 3 months. For 3 months, she hid that baby so nobody would find out, because she knew exactly what would happen, wouldn't she? Didn't she? Exactly. But after 3 months, a problem started again. It's pretty hard to hide a baby forever, isn't it? After 3 months, they're starting to roll over and make those cooing, adorable little noises. And of course, they make bubbles and do all that baby stuff. It's really great. But it's not easy to keep hiding it. And so Jochebed came up with a realization that she could no longer hide her baby. I can't begin to imagine how heavy her heart felt, and the tears she probably cried as she realized that it wasn't much longer that she could hide her baby boy. But she knew in her heart that God had a plan for this baby, that he was a very special baby. So she listened to God, and God told her, I'm sure God told her what the plan was. And so Jochebed went down to the river's edge. Remember I told you the Nile River went down the middle of the country, and they didn't live very far from it. So she went down to the edge of the Nile River, and she picked reeds, R-E-E-D-S. And the people of Egypt and of Israel as well learned to weave baskets. Now, if you know me, you know that I could hardly even braid hair, so I can't imagine I could make a basket. But they were able to take the reeds and weave them back and forth until they could make all kinds of things, baskets and mats and all kinds of other things, containers to hold things. And so she took reeds from the river, right there by the river, and she wove them into a basket. Now, you won't have any trouble believing that I did not make this basket. I bought this basket many years ago. I really like it. I think it's a beautiful basket. I love the pattern on it. But I brought it today because it reminds me, perhaps, of the basket that Jochebed might have made. She made a basket. Now, I'm sure it was bigger than this because, well, when we get to the next part of the story, you'll know why it would have to be bigger. But she wove it, and she wove it with tender, loving care because she was making a basket bed for her baby. How's that going to help her hide her baby? Hang on. So she wove her basket, and I'm sure she made it just as strong, as sturdy as she could. And then she lined it with tar. Tar is like the sticky stuff that you see when they lay it on roofs, and it kind of is dark and maybe sticky at first when it's wet, but as it dries, it makes things waterproof. So you might see them on people's roofs to keep the tiles on so the water won't leak in. You sometimes see tar on the road when they are laying new road because it keeps the road waterproof and keeps the water from puddling on the road. It helps it roll off. So we're told she made a basket, and I really do like this basket. I just think it's so pretty. And then she lined the inside of it with tar. I don't have any tar, so you need to use your imagination, but she lined the basket with tar. And then she took probably the softest blanket that she had, and she took that blanket and she lined it inside the basket. Maybe she put 2 or 3 in there to make it oh so very, very soft. And she put the basket together, and then she took her baby. He was 3 months old, and she took her precious baby, and I want you to imagine how she must have felt. She's taking her baby and she's putting him in a basket, and she's going to hide him. Where do you think you're going to hide a 3-month-old baby in a basket? You might know this story, so you might know where I'm going with it. She was taking her baby to the river. So basically her basket was a little boat, a boat for her baby. She would put him in this basket and let him float on the river in the reeds. Remember I showed you these reeds that she would make her basket out of? Some of these reeds were 10, 12, 14 feet tall. I'm 5.5 feet tall. So think 2 of me and even taller than that. So these reeds were very tall and very thick. And she was going to put him floating in that basket right there in the reeds. It was the only thing she could think of. You and I might say, well, that's not a very good idea. But she couldn't think of anything else. She knew that if the Egyptians found her little baby boy, they would kill him. And that was the best answer she had. It's a hard answer to have, isn't it? So I have to imagine Jochebed takes her baby, and I would imagine she has tears pouring down her face. She's kissing his little cheeks. She's loving on him. She's feeding him one more time. And she lays him ever so carefully in the basket and cuddles him down, and maybe he went to sleep. And she carried him, probably crying silently because she didn't want anyone to know, carried him down to the river, gently put the top on it. The top had air holes so he could breathe. He wouldn't suffocate. She knew that. And she took her baby down to the river, and she put her basket like a little boat that would rock her baby at the edge of the river where he could float on the water right there in the reeds. Sounds pretty dangerous, doesn't it? There were other things that were dangerous too. If you know anything about the Nile River, back then it had some of the same dangers it does today. The first one that comes to my mind are crocodiles. Crocodiles are enormous apex predators. They'll eat just about anything they want to because they are 10, 12, 14 feet long. They can weigh over 1,000 pounds. A crocodile, seeing a little basket floating in the water, might say, "Ooh, look, snacks," and snatch that baby up and just gulp him right down. What could happen if the water got rough and bouncy? The basket could tip over, right? What would happen if it got stuck in the reeds and maybe a turtle or a big fish bumped it? Water could get in the basket. What if somebody found the baby? Oh, she couldn't even think of that. All she knew, all Jochebed knew, is that she was trusting God to take care of this baby boy that he had given her, and she was trusting him. So she takes her basket down to the river, and she takes with her her older daughter. Remember the one I told you I'm thinking is maybe 7? We don't know for sure. She might have been 9 or 8. She was old enough, though, to do this job. The mother left her as the watch person. She was the guard. So the baby was put in the basket. The basket was put at the edge of the river, floating there. The mama had to go back home because if the Egyptians saw her hanging by the river, they'd start looking around and say, "What you doing there, lady?" And they'd figure out about the basket and find her baby and kill him. So she had to go back where it wouldn't be obvious. But she could leave her little girl there. And the little girl's job was to watch the basket and see what happened. Now, if you were left with that job, if you were the big brother or sister who was left to watch, what kind of things would go through your mind? What could happen to your little brother? I'm sure you were thinking the worst and being so scared. So I have to imagine that she was kind of hiding, maybe off to the side, maybe trying to act like she was playing in the sand or, building something with rocks or something, acting like she wasn't really watching, but the whole time she's paying attention to that little basket that's bobbing in the water gently. And then she hears a terrifying sound. She hears footsteps. And I can imagine that the sister just almost froze as she's listening. Who's coming? Who's coming? Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! And she realizes, who's coming? It's the king's daughter. It's the princess. She's coming down to the river. She's going to take a swim with some of her servant girls. And they come down. They don't know what's going on, and so they're probably laughing and talking. We don't know how old this princess was, but we do know she was a grown-up. And she had come down to the river just to have some fun and to relax and hang out with some of her friends. So she's down there splashing. Can you imagine the sister? She's standing here. She's staring. She's looking at the basket. She's looking at the princess just down the riverbank. The princess doesn't see her, but after a few minutes, the princess sees the basket. It's just bobbing in the water. It's unusual to see a basket floating in the water. Most people would hang on to a basket like this. It's so nice and sturdy and big. Most people aren't going to toss a basket in the water. So the princess says to one of her friends, her girls there, "Hey, what is that over there? Go get that basket. It looks like someone left a basket or dropped a basket." So the girl goes over, gets the basket, and she pulls it. And I imagine her kind of pulling it across the water. And as the basket gets closer to the princess hears something. This is what she hears. Wah, wah. Now it was kind of quiet because the lid was on, but she's hearing wah, wah. You know what she's hearing, don't you? She's hearing a baby. Can you imagine what the princess was thinking? She must have been so confused. She came down to the river's edge to have a nice afternoon, playing in the water and splashing, and she finds a basket with a crying baby in it, so she takes off the lid and she looks in the basket, and she knows immediately it's one of the slave babies, and it's a baby boy. Now you know she knew her dad's order. Her dad, the king, the pharaoh, was the man who had made that horrible, horrible order to kill all the newborn baby boys from the slaves. And yet right here, the princess is holding a basket with one of those slave baby boys in it. And what do you think she might have done? Well, she might have obeyed her dad and said, "Get rid of him. Just take him, girls, and pitch him in the water. He needs to be taken care of and gotten rid of and killed." But she didn't. And I think that's because of God. God was answering Jochebed's prayer to take care of her baby. So she takes out the baby, and she's looking at him. She can see he's little. He's not newborn, but he's just a few months old, and she can see that. And he needs his mama. He needs someone to feed him. They didn't have bottles back then. They needed the mama. So she takes this crying baby out. She has compassion on him. Compassion means she cared about him. And she looks at him, and I can just kind of imagine all her thoughts. Her afternoon of playing at the river's edge has now turned into a baby rescue. What's she going to do with the baby? And then she has a plan. "I think I'll keep him. I'll just tell everybody I had a baby. I guess if you're the princess, you can do that." I don't know. But that's what she decided. But she still had a problem because she couldn't feed him. She didn't have milk to feed the baby. And that's where the sister comes in. Remember, the sister had been watching all this. So she was standing off to the side, maybe in the reeds. Well, by now, I just imagine she's just standing there with her mouth hanging open, her eyes as big as saucers, staring at the princess, holding her brother and wondering, is she going to kill him? Is she going to take him to the king? What's she going to do? And then the princess, she hears the princess talking to her friends. And the princess says, look at this one of the little slave babies. I think I'll keep him. But how am I going to take care of him? And let me tell you about that smart sister. That sister must have overheard. And she got so bold. Ooh, I hope I would have been that bold. She walked right up to the princess and said, "Excuse me, ma'am. I couldn't help but noticing you're holding a slave baby and that you're looking for someone to take care of him. I think I might know someone who could help." "You think?" And the princess said, "Little girl, that's a great idea. Go get me someone. If you think there's someone you know who can help me take care of this baby, go get her for me right now." Okay, I want you to imagine with me, this sister, her heart has just been beating like this, just thump, thump, thump. She's terrified that her baby brother is going to be hurt or killed, and now the princess has asked her to go find someone to take care of the baby? We both know who she got. And in my mind, I can see this sister running so fast, she probably could hardly breathe. Run, 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 run. And she gets running to the house, and she throws open the door, and she yells, "Mom, Mom, Mom!" How do you think Jochebed was probably feeling at this point? I would imagine by now she had gone home to her house and maybe was sitting in a corner just crying, thinking her baby was lost forever, and wondering what was going on. and just crying because she'd done everything she could. And she hears her daughter run in the door, and she probably thinks the worst. Oh, what horrible news is she going to tell me? What did she have to see? But that's not it. So the sister comes in, she's like, Mom, the princess got the baby. And I'm sure Jochebed's like, no, anyone but the princess. No, says the sister. The princess wants a babysitter. She wanted me to get somebody who could help take care of the baby. Okay, by now, Jochebed understands. The princess needs someone to help with the baby. So I would imagine she wiped her tears and she took off running as fast as she could. And her daughter was right there with her. And the two of them arrived, breathless, out of breath. I'm sure Jochebed's trying to make her hair look nice so she looks like she's real with it. And she sees the princess holding her baby. And the princess says to Jochebed, Ma'am, I just found this slave baby floating in this basket. I want to keep him as my son, but he's too young. I can't take him to the palace now. I don't have any way to feed him or take care of him. I'll tell you what, she says to Jochebed. Would you take this baby to your house? Could you feed him and clothe him until he's old enough to leave you and come live at the palace with me and be my son? In fact, said the princess, I'll pay you. I'll give you money to take care of him because he's going to be my son, but I want him taken such good care of. I want to make sure he has plenty to eat and clothes to wear and shoes for his feet as he's growing. And when he's old enough and he no longer needs to be cared for like a baby, when he's old enough to come, he will come to my house and live with me and become my son. I'm pretty sure Jochebed started crying again, but this time it was tears of joy. She was crying and thanking God. Oh, God, you had answered my prayer way beyond anything I could have thought of. I never in a wildest dream even could have pretended of such a story. And look what you have done, God. You have given me back my son to raise until he's old enough. And so she took her baby home, and Jochebed and her husband Amram raised the baby until he was old enough to go live with the princess and be adopted by her and become her son. But Amram and Jochebed had him for a few years. And can't you imagine, they taught him about God, how much God loved him, and the special plan God had for his life. And don't you know, they told him about the basket and how he had been taken out of the water. And for a special reason, God had a special protective hand on that baby. And when he was old enough, I'm sure it was with tears again, but maybe different tears, because Jochebed took him to the princess, and the princess gave him a name. The princess named him, you might have already figured it out by now, Moses. Moses means, I have pulled you out of the water. And so the princess named this baby Moses. And Moses, if you read farther in the Bible, you will read the amazing way God used Moses to actually end up helping the Hebrew people, the Israelite slaves, become free. So the prayer that Jochebed prayed all those years, the stories that they taught Moses when he was a little boy at their home before he went to the palace, she prepared him through her faith and her love and her strength of prayer to be the man that would actually set the Hebrew people free from slavery. So as we finish up today, we talked about mothers. And we talked about this mother right here, Jochebed, and what an amazing mother she was. You have an amazing mother too. Your mother loves you every bit as much as Jochebed loved her baby Moses, and Moses' big brother Aaron and big sister Miriam. And Jochebed did what most mothers do. She thought and took care of others. So right now, when we look at the word mother, this is the way most mothers act. They look out for the other. And so your mother is like that too. So today, we're going to thank God for your mother. And you know what? You might have a mother, a stepmother. You might have a grandmother, an aunt, a cousin, a neighbor, someone at church, someone in your dance class or in your sports team, another woman. You might have several women in your life who are like mothers to you. Today is a good day to thank God for them and let them know how much you love them, because they look out for others, just like Jochebed did. So we're going to finish today. If you want to make a card for your mom, there's some that are going to be on the Facebook page that your folks can print out for you to color for your moms if you would like to, or grandmas, or anybody else you want to thank. But right now we're going to thank God for your mother. So if you'll close your eyes and fold your hands with me, we're going to finish today. Dear Lord Jesus, we love you so much, and we are so thankful today for the mothers that you have given us and all the women in our lives who are like mothers to us, who have cared for us and looked out for us. We thank you for Jochebed and how she raised Moses to love you and follow you. And we thank you for our mothers today, Lord, and we give this day to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Happy Mother's Day to you kids. Make sure you give your moms extra hugs and kisses. See you next week. Bye now.